Good to have you back on, sir.
Hey, Paul, I was enjoying that bumper music there.
Yeah, I know. Sorry we cut it short. I wanted to get to the interview, but yeah, we'll get some more coming up here in just a minute, though. So tell us, where are you right now? Are you back in Arkansas? Are you in D.C.? What's going on with you?
We are in D.C. Right now and still in session, wrapping up the week.
Okay, so how are things? Like, what's going on right now?
Well, you may have seen the news on this. We voted on a balanced budget amendment. As you know, I've talked to you about this many times. I've worked hard to try and get a balanced budget amendment to the floor. I make this an issue every year, and this is the second time in the almost 8 years that I've been here that I've been given the opportunity to vote on a balanced budget amendment. And yet we still had 6 Republicans who voted no. So I'm trying to figure that one out. We had 3 Democrats that voted yes, but ultimately we had 233 votes. You need 287 to send it over to the Senate, so we fell short over here.
Wow. Well, yeah, that's unfortunate. And right now it seems like there's if you read the media reports, I mean, the media, the liberal media, they're out there saying, "Hey, Republicans are worried and they're scared," and about the midterms and things like that. And then you hear, if you go to the liberal, really the ones that are openly liberal, it's like a blue wave is coming and that sort of thing. And so talk a little bit about that. I mean, what are your thoughts on the potential of a blue wave?
Well, I'll tell you what, the punditry has got it wrong consistently. They were decidedly wrong on President Trump. There must have been 90+% of the media that projected him, not just, we think he's, going to lose, but, we're projecting Hillary as the winner. I mean, they were doing everything in the world they could to, line up for a coronation, and they were all wrong. And their polling, underlying their projections, was wrong. And they haven't learned from anything. They haven't learned, their polling methodology was flawed, and they haven't learned, really what drove people to vote for Donald Trump in the first place. And I think that sentiment still exists widely across the country, and that you really want to see Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, because she's not doing her team any favors by continually going out there and talking about the crumbs of tax reform and things of that nature. She had the temerity to talk about, to quote Martin Luther King, I think it was yesterday or the day before, talking about when there are people in abject poverty, there shouldn't be people with opulent wealth. Paraphrasing, and she is one of those that is opulently wealthy. I mean, it boggles the mind that she can stand there straight faced and say some of the things that she says, and expect people are going to connect with that and believe it. She comes from a very wealthy family. She's one of the richest members of Congress, and yet she's going to try and pretend as though somehow she's got a connection to the poor, downtrodden people of America who are barely getting by, and then at the same time calling their tax reform bonus, crumbs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a huge disconnect there. The left is lurching further. I mean, the Democrats in Washington are lurching further and further to the left, and as long as they have Nancy Pelosi as their poster child, I don't think they can expect the blue wave that they're talking about.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I'm just hoping that. To me, let me just say this: there is not a positive word that the press can say about President Donald Trump, and without even getting into the Russia situation and their constant obsession with that. But it seems to me that if you really kind of take a long view of this over the first year of his presidency into now, there's a lot of traps and nets that I feel like that the media and the left, they fall into their own nets. They fall into their own traps for this guy. I mean, right now we're looking at an amazing situation that happened last week. Saudi Arabia recognized Israel's right to exist. And you look at the Korean Peninsula potentially being denuclearized.
think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey folks, good morning. I hope everything's going fantastic. My name is Paul. This is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. And we want you to be a part of that with us as we expose the truth, expose Arkansas corruption. But we actually want to see the ideas that are campaigned on actually implemented and not just used to attain political power. Feel free. You can give me a phone call, 870-275-9799, or text message that same number, 870-275-9799, or feel free, go on over to our Facebook page where we're live streaming, facebook.com/Conduit News or conduitnews.com, or you can head to the YouTube channel and give us a like there to get our shorter videos over at YouTube. All right, so, yeah, you guys, especially if you've been listening to the program for a while, we have talked at length about these little bitty grants called General Improvement Funds that are no more because the Arkansas Supreme Court not once but twice has ruled them to be unconstitutional. You say, why twice, Paul? Well, the second time was in response to a legislative maneuver to launder the grants through the economic development improvement centers or whatever, the little ones across the state, these little entities. And that was what, that somehow made it okay, that if the grant money came from the development districts and not the legislators themselves directly, it would be fine. Well, the problem is the legislators were still directing the money. They were just not officially directing the money, and the planning and development districts were just rolling over because they knew exactly why they existed. They existed just to launder the money. Now, what is not talked about is that these planning and development districts would actually, some of them would take a percentage of the grant money for themselves. So the taxpayer dollars would go to Little Rock. Well, they'd come from us to Little Rock. Then Little Rock would send them to the planning and development districts, and then the planning and development districts would basically tax some of that money to pay for their own expenses, and it was not a negligible amount. I mean, it was a significant amount, and then they would send it to where it needed to go. Now, that's the price of doing business, I guess. Now, all of this was brought to the forefront yesterday in the public corruption trial of John Woods. In the public corruption trial of John Woods, we found out, we had testimony from the former head of the Northwest Arkansas Planning and Development District. And this guy said, here's one article. Official testifies that one group in ex-Arkansas legislative corruption case used another's nonprofit tax exempt status. I mean, that's what, that's the kind of the main takeaway from yesterday. But Mike Norton, I guess, he was the director of the Northwest Arkansas Economic Development District. He essentially said on the stand, look, we really were a rubber stamp. When the board met, we never denied. If a legislator supported a grant going to this particular place, we never denied it. We approved it. So, all that being said, I'm going to talk about that at 7. I'm going to give you some more details in this because it's fascinating. Every day we are getting to listen to what the government's case is against John Woods, against Randall Shelton, what would have been their case against Orrin Paris III, the former president of Ecclesia College. Of course, now he's testifying against the other two guys in some capacity. We assume he is certainly, he pled guilty. But I want to put that on the back burner for now. I want to cover that here in about an hour. By the way, at the bottom of this hour, we've got Mr. Felix Norman with Patriots Vac 746. He's going to stop by, coming up at 7:33. We'll readdress what happened in the court John Woods case at 7, and then at 7:33 we have Republican gubernatorial candidate Jan Morgan on the program. But here's where I wanted to start. Speaking of general improvement funds, I think most of us have learned that giving taxpayer money to a politician to have them go back home and decide where it goes is not a good environment, does not produce the type of government that we want. Can we all agree with that? That giving officials this discretion to just spend money wherever they want, not only does it buy votes or retain loyalty and stuff like that, but it should not be left up to one person. Not at all. And, we also got to make sure that if we have any kind of system where we fund, community needs, whatever that system looks like, that the people's representatives are not just a rubber stamp on what one man wants. Now, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking, of course, about the governor. Noel Oman yesterday with a headline, "Cash to help Arkansas communities called doable, but GIF is history," the governor says. And this is what caught my eye. Oh, GIF is history. Yeah, we've heard that before. We heard that in 2015 when the governor said GIF was history, got all kinds of positive publicity. And then guess what happened after that? He took it out of his budget at the last minute because legislators basically threw a fit. So on Monday, I guess the governor was asked a question. Is that what happened here? The governor's remarks came amid the federal corruption trial of John Woods. Springdale Republican was indicted. Hutchinson spoke at a lunchtime meeting at the Metro Plan Board of Directors annual retreat. This was in Hot Springs Village. He took questions from the audience. And Hutchinson fielded the last question from Guy Mayor Sammy Higdon. And Mr. Higdon asked this: GIF grant money, is there any discussion that it might be put back in effect? Or is there any way we can figure out how to do it where it don't get squandered? The mayor asked. Now, the governor did not equivocate. Of course, and to his credit here, at least it's good at least it sounds good. I'm going to say this is Asa Hutchinson. This sounds good when he said, quote, GIF money is history and is no longer and is not going to happen. Period. What an answer. End quote. Now, so, I mean, obviously, he has to say that. I mean, can you imagine him not saying that? Him not saying, like, well, maybe we can leave the door open. Maybe it's a good thing. Now, see, the issue here is you do have a lot of small towns. And these small towns have been used to the money. You hear this example a lot. You have rural fire departments, and they depended on getting, this $20,000 a year or every 2 years or whatever the case may be. Or, in some cases it's more than that. And they've come to depend on this, and now this money is gone. Now, let's be clear. Why is the money gone? Well, because politicians decided to take a cut themselves, and now it's really blown the entire system up for everybody else. But at its core, the whole thing is ridiculous, because why should a politician be able to just arbitrarily give you the money just because they want your favor and your votes and they want to retain political power? It's a very dangerous concept, and it only inflates the power of incumbency, which means it's harder for us to control our government. It's harder for us to change our government, because sometimes, a lot of times it's like, well, you got a good guy in there. Yeah, sometimes you do get a good guy in there, but most of the time you don't. Is that pessimistic of me to say? Most of the time you don't have a good guy in the office. And that's because the nature of man and the nature of human beings are that even in our good constitutional republic system, it's not a perfect system, and the people that can't create for themselves are naturally going to be drawn to political power so that they can take from those that can create something and keep it for themselves. And that's really what we're fighting here, folks, by the way. That's really exactly what we're fighting. If you hadn't figured that out yet. That's why some of you small business owners out there, I know you guys are doing great, and I appreciate your hard work, but some of you guys are going to need to run for office eventually. You know? And who wants to do that? Yeah, I got it. I'm just telling you. If you can actually create something for yourself, and you've created and you've been successful, it seems to me most of the people that feed off of government were not able to create something for themselves. So now they want to use government. They want to use government so that they are able to secure something for themselves. And really what that would be is basically it's like legalized theft. And that's the whole point of this general improvement scam, by the way. It was theft. It was illegal, but we just now found out about it. But the fact is you take taxpayer money, you launder it through the planning and development districts, they get a cut, and then it finally gets back to the taxpayer. But, that taxpayer is a special taxpayer that knew the legislator and got the money for this group or that group. And some of the causes, I'm sure, are fine and noble and good and dandy and whatever. But there has to be a better way to distribute that money. There has to be a way look, I would just tell you, I would be a fan, and this is what I've heard. Now, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I have heard, okay, well, see, I would like, if you're going to spend money on a rural fire department, I think the entire legislature should have to vote on it. But I'm also told there's like a constitutional provision in the Arkansas Constitution where the state can't actually do that for specific local projects like that. So I'm confused on that. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I'm confused, and I don't know. So I don't know. There may need to be a law change or something like that in order to, if people want. I mean, make no mistake. It's all right as people who are governed to get our elected officials. I mean, if you know what I mean, to direct taxpayer money where the taxpayers see fit for it to go. But so the governor said it's history. Okay, that's good. I'm going to believe him this time because he said it was history back in 2015, and then he reneged on that. But I'm going to believe the governor this time that general improvement funds are history, okay? But Governor Hutchinson went on to say, quote, "Now I do believe that there's ways you can have competitive grants that help our communities in terms of their unique needs." All right, let's stop right there. Okay, so it seems like they have been talking about, well, how do we keep this money flowing or going back into the community? So let's change the name of the program. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Let's change the name of the program from Private Option to Arkansas Works, from General Improvement Fund to the the Fund to Cure Cancer. Let's rename it that. That's how's anyone going to criticize a fund that essentially is the same thing, but is named the Fund to Cure Cancer? That's going to be a tough one to criticize. Please, you just got to understand. Don't think that is not a possibility. I'm serious. Don't think it's not a possibility that whatever they choose to rename it, if they do, is going to be renamed something, that's just above reproach, let's say. So he says, so now I do believe that there are ways that you can have competitive grants that can help our communities in terms of their unique needs that's not legislatively directed, but that is competitively looked at. Okay, so it's not legislatively directed. Now, does that mean it's not individually directed or it's not directed at all? He goes on. So I think that is something we can continue to talk about and look at because I recognize the need that happens in our communities that you'd like to be able to have the opportunity to apply for grants. The report goes on. The state already has a program in place that the governor said he sees as a model. In his remarks, Hutchinson referred to it as the Rural Development Grant Program, but he actually was referring to the Rural Community Grant Program, which is administered by the Rural Services Division of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, which is under the governor's control. I added that part in. So, essentially, the program goes on. The key problem with the program is giving one man or woman, basically, let's just say, is giving one legislator complete discretion over where their cut of the general improvement money goes. That's the issue, period. That's why there's a problem. To suggest that the problem lies elsewhere, no, the problem is with the temptation and the favor that you curry. That's the whole issue here. That's the problem. That the only way we're going to be able to do this is, and so what he is saying is, well, we can have a grant program and you can compete for it. You can comply. Well, is it going to be like the medical marijuana applications? You mean, like that, how swimmingly that went? Who gets what? I'll tell you, this money, this general improvement money, is now going to go into the Rural Services Department, and they're going to administer grants. That's the plan. That's what they're going to try to do. That is controlled by Governor Asa Hutchinson. This will be used as a tool to control more legislators and their votes. Because if their rural fire department needs money and their representative happens to be an actual conservative that votes what the people want, you can count. You can count on the governor saying, well, I guess that rural fire department doesn't need their $30,000 this year. And that's exactly what will happen. And this is the way things work down there. The problem with general improvement funds wasn't that these people got caught doing something illegal. The problem was you were giving one legislator the authority over, like, in the House, it was $100,000, and what was it in the Senate? Was it how much? $300,000 each, essentially each. You just get to decide. Here's your $300,000 or something. I think it's actually way more than that, but for the Senate side, that's the issue. The issue is, it's just not. You don't want to give that much power to anybody. And if I don't want to give that much power to John Woods, I don't want to give that much power and just give. Now we're going to give all the money to Asa and let him divvy it up and let him decide. Oh, but there'll be competitive grants. Now, see, that is a convention. Just so you know, the governor knows what the problem is too, and he says, well, so what do we do? Well, we'll have a competitive bidding process. And that is a convention that is going to be used to try to sell you on him getting the money. You see, we've just added another layer of, it'll be okay, we'll be able to manage it, it's fine. No, it's still ultimately up to the governor. Because I can promise you this, if the governor calls the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, which controls the rural services, and says, this guy gets a grant, guess what? This guy gets a grant, period. Any governor, not just Asa, any governor. And no governor should have that authority. It just shouldn't have it. And even if there's, they'll have to have legislative approval. Are you serious? Really? The Legislative Council will approve it. The Legislative Council is a rubber stamp right now. And they always do what the governor wants. And you don't think, you don't want, the Legislative Council doesn't want to approve the grant? Oh, okay, well, I guess you guys, I'm not going to recommend any grants for, y'all aren't getting anything then. I'll just keep the money I'll just keep the money in the Rural Services Department. You could essentially hold the state hostage for whatever you want politically. And it's at a much worse, it's at a much broader and horrific scale, in my opinion, if we're talking about smaller government, local control versus bigger, more centralized government. Anyway, just wanted you guys to know, general improvement funds is over. General improvement funds are history. Until we rename the program and give it a nice fancy name. That's above reproach of criticism. We got to take a break. Back in a moment.
need conservative legislation killed?
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
Nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you.
Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions.
Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody. Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, 870-275-9799. That is the telephone number this morning if you would like to give us a phone call. Well, every morning, and we're also streaming over at Conduit News or Facebook.com/Conduit News. So I guess 7:05 yesterday, I kind of caught a Facebook post by State Representative James Sturch, and he was upset at a Conduit for Action article that just simply asked the question, should a legislator also work for a lobbyist? And, of course, you can't be a legislator and be a lobbyist, but apparently there's a loophole where you can work for one and be a state representative. And so Conduit exposed that. Of course, State Representative James Sturch is in the middle of a primary campaign challenging Senator Linda Collins Smith, and he didn't like it too much. He thought it was a cheap shot. Well, there's actually now up at conduitforaction.org a story about his non-denial denial. So check it out. It's up right now. And it's pretty fascinating when you think about it. By the way, I thought this was true, and I said this yesterday. This whole legacy consulting, legacy properties, the lobbyist employing State Representative James Sturch while he's a politician. I thought I was right on this. We talked about this back in 2016, well before the primary season even got into full effect or full swing. We're up against a hard break, though. Got to go. Back in a minute. If Kim Jong-un and the meeting actually takes place, I mean, there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of positive, and then there's some potential positive things, and I think President Trump is an integral part of that right now.
No, I think that's true, and I think that you would think after almost a year and a half in, as he's been president now for almost a year and a half, he's proven them wrong at every turn. I mean, I don't always agree with necessarily the tone or the type of rhetoric that the president puts out there. But one of the things that I've had to come to terms with, and I had to do this with Obama, you've got to look past the personality and look at the policy, and the numbers don't lie. I mean, our economic trajectory has improved tremendously. Opportunities for people across the economic spectrum are much, much better. I mean, historically better. And so, I know it's easy to focus in on someone with a big personality, to be honest about it, a big ego. It's easy to get focused in on all of that. And that's one of the things that I've had to condition myself to is to look beyond that and focus in on the policy and the numbers. And you'll see that there is an awful lot to be excited about that has transpired over the last year and a half or so, and that's directly attributable to this president. Mm-hmm. At the same time, President Obama, maybe one of the most charismatic individuals to occupy the White House, certainly, in my lifetime, was a great speaker, very eloquent, and I met him 2 or 3 times, and he's very, very friendly. But his policies were the worst thing in the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were terrible. There was very seldom anything we agreed on. And so, again, you have to get past the personal, presentation and focus in on the policy. And if you can do that, you can make a better judgment about whether you support this policy or that policy.
Yeah.
Take away the personalities and focus in on the policy.
Yeah, it's it's what you do, for sure. Actions are bigger than words. And let me we're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. I mean, you said he proves them wrong time and again. I mean, think about when he came out and he said, I found out that I was wiretapped, and the media freaks out and everything else. And and then, of course, you being on the Intel Committee, and you guys are voting to release that memo, and we now know, we know that was true, I mean, and is there any more fallout from that, by the way? I haven't really heard anything else to come from, that memo, but that memo was very revealing.
Well, that's why you haven't heard anything more about it. Because it was accurate, and then of course the Democrat response to it was inaccurate and full of pejorative and personal attacks that really just were sort of a knee-jerk reaction to the factual presentation we made in that memo. It's important to know that if that were false.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. We got a half hour under our belt here, and I want to welcome back to the program. We have Mr. Felix Normand on the line. Felix, welcome back, sir. How are you doing this morning?
Doing good. How about you?
Doing well myself. I want to remind you guys out there listening that this portion of the broadcast is brought to you by the Patriots of Act 746. Now, what you want to do about the Patriots of Act 746 is you want to go to Facebook and you want to search for Patriots of Act 746 and you want to request to be a member if you're interested in what they're interested in, and that is constitutional carry in the state of Arkansas, your Second Amendment rights, and what you can and what you can't do in the state of Arkansas when it comes to carrying a firearm or, a knife or a club for that matter, because it's Act 746 and it decriminalized the possession of a firearm here in the state of Arkansas. Let me put it to you this way. There is no law that says that you are allowed to sit on your front porch and drink iced tea. But there is no law that prevents you from doing that. That is the status of our gun laws here in Arkansas right now. Felix, real quick, just remind everybody how you got involved with the Patriots of Act 746.
Well, I got involved because, I was a member of some other gun groups, and I remember when they passed the law in 2013, and we used to discuss it among ourselves. I used to work at a local gun dealer here, and it was Wednesday night prior to Thanksgiving, and the last customer of the night I was waiting on. I was selling him a gun who was buying it for his son. Well, it turns out that was, at the time, Arkansas Majority Leader. I can't even think of his name now. Anyway, he was telling, we were talking about, I still was telling him about Act 746, and he explained to me the whole detail, how it came about. Westerman, Bruce Westerman, that's who it was. Mm-hmm. So I got it directly from the horse's mouth, and then I ended up finding the Patriots group and the old Arkansas Carry group, and that's how I got involved.
Great. That's fantastic. And obviously, I mean, it's been beneficial, because it's good to know what your rights are, and of course now we have a situation where some in positions of power are saying, well, check with your local prosecutor before you carry a weapon. And it's like, okay, well, the law says what the law says. So it's really frustrating right now. I wish we had our leaders, kind of just being more clear and just telling people what the law is. I mean, regardless of whether or not it's a big change or not from the status quo.
Well, unfortunately, we're still butting heads with that. We still have new people showing up on the group almost daily. And we had somebody yesterday ask, hey, has anybody called the ASP recently and asked them what they're going to do if somebody is caught open carrying and they have a concealed carry permit? And again, they were told, if you're open carrying and have a permit, they're going to take your permit away. And we just shake our head and say, how could they possibly still be saying that? Again, this is not everybody that feels that way, but why a citizen should be able to call a state agency and get the correct information. But apparently they can't. They were even told they won't even follow Act 486. I mean, how could you sit and tell somebody that you're basically going to ignore a bill passed by the House?
So they said that. Hang on, this is now a law, and this was passed last year. I believe it was State Representative John Payton's bill, and it is called now Act 486. So look this up, folks. Now, Felix, tell us what this did. And you're saying that the Arkansas State Police is now saying they're just going to ignore the law. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what this person was told on this telephone call.
Okay. All right. So what is 486?
Well, what happened, we all know what happened to Drew Tanner at the Walmart open carry incident.
Yes.
Okay, he was the one open carrying and now got a lawsuit against state police. Eventually, the powers that be decided to pass a law that says, look, just because you got a concealed carry permit, we're not going to violate your Second Amendment rights. And this act basically is stopping the state police, one, from removing somebody's concealed carry permit if you're open carrying. And two, it basically reaffirms Arkansans' Second Amendment rights. And it specifies in here, the Second Amendment in Arkansas, Article 5 of the Arkansas Code. So they're basically reminding people and basically putting it in the code where it's readable that you have a right to carry any way you see fit in Arkansas.
I mean, and I thought it was one of the silver linings in a session that was mostly about big government. I mean, here was an example of John Payton doing a really good thing here and trying to put a check on the government's authority and the power. And, this whole thing is frustrating because, I mean, we didn't even have a concealed carry license in the state of Arkansas till the 90s. So ask yourself how people were exercising their Second Amendment rights before that. How were they doing it? Were they just in blatant violation of the law? It's like, no, we have been psychologically conditioned to believe that we have to have this permission slip in the first place. And at this point, there's a benefit to having it if you want to go across state lines or something. But respond to that, Felix.
That's exactly right. And I just in dealing with people that live here, it seems that people in the outer regions of Arkansas have had it better than the people of the inner city, per se. So somebody in Little Rock before was not going to be able to walk around with a gun, whereas somebody in western Arkansas, southern Arkansas, northern may have been able to get away with it because it's more country boys. They more understand the Second Amendment than the big city life.
Yeah. And so you think you think that was the motivation behind, well, we need a way to regulate who can have a gun in a bigger city like Little Rock? Was that why they decided to do this?
Well, I think that was part of the reason, but I've also heard it was also money driven. They're drawing a lot more money by the concealed carry by issuing the concealed carry permits as opposed to not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's about money now.
You got to understand too. A lot of gun people, even amongst ourselves, there are gun people who consider themselves pro two-way, but they still demand, they still like having that permit because it shows at least you've been checked out. Because we just can't trust everybody with a gun. There's even gun people that still feel this way. So it's not like this is just this is just liberal versus conservative, anti-gun versus gun. There are gun people who prefer the concealed carry permit too.
Yeah, so I've really come to this realization. I guess maybe in the last year or so, when you think about the idea of self-defense as a human right. Just like your freedom of speech or your right to assemble, or freedom of the press, or your freedom of religion, or freedom to be secure in your papers and your effects. You also have a right to defend yourself and your property, and it's a human right. And,
well, I'd say,
go ahead.
Is the Second Amendment, or your right to bear arms, is that considered to be a civil right? And if it is, then anybody who is against carrying a firearm to defend themselves, are they not against civil rights?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think about the statistics. I mean, a lot of people, and this is nationwide, they bought into the concealed carry thing because it does make them feel secure. Like, okay, they don't realize that they're essentially saying, well, I have to pay a licensing fee for the government to sell me back my right. Okay, we all, this is, I feel like, a human need. We want the government to be good. We want this affirmation, it's in a little way it's just kind of like a laziness, and so we want to have this government validate us, and I'm approved to carry a weapon and carry a gun because they've given me this license back. And this is all over the country that this has happened, and this is the way most people think that the Second Amendment should be regulated today. But I know Act 746 or the patrons of Act 746. Let's just look at what the state of Arkansas's law says, and it doesn't have even a penalty. I mean, we're waiting on an opinion from the Attorney General about, well, if you do get caught with a weapon concealed without a license, what's the penalty? Where is it in the statute?
Right, and it's taken her a while to answer that too.
Yes, it is. I know. We're still waiting. I think it's a great question. Again, that was a letter written to her by Senator Linda Collins Smith. She was the one that started this inquiry, and so I'm really excited to get an answer to that. So what do we do? Okay, I want to go back to Act 486, Felix. Did we lose Felix? I think Felix, are you there? All right. Well, we'll have to get Felix back on the line. Go ahead and looks like we lost Felix. I could hear myself for a second. Did you hear that? Anyway, I want to go here. He's calling back right now. I want to go back to this 486 because essentially what Felix said is that there was somebody who claims that somebody at the Arkansas State Police said that they were just going to ignore 486. So, Felix, we got you back on the line, and I appreciate. Sorry we dropped your call, Felix. But so let's go back to 486. What do we do if it is in fact true that this person was told by the Arkansas State Police or somebody there that they're just going to ignore 486? I mean, what is our recourse at that point? How do we get them to start following the law?
Well, that's a tough question because a lot of us have some kind of self-defense insurance, and especially if they have some of the better ones where you're covered if you're just merely arrested, because people need to understand this. You can basically be arrested for carrying a gun. If that law enforcement officer decides to arrest you, you're going to be handcuffed, right, or you're going to be cited, and now you're going to have to fight it in court. Now, eventually, they'll probably never charge you. However, you're going to have to spend the money to defend that. Now, there should be some recourse for you to fight false charges, but unfortunately in Arkansas, there's not, at least under certain circumstances. You saw that. I don't know if you saw that case. It just happened. The video that just came out for Walnut Ridge for that law enforcement there.
No, I didn't. What happened? What happened?
Of course, it did. Oh, it didn't involve. He wasn't an armed. He was somebody who worked for the railroad. The video just came out yesterday. I'm not sure exactly when the incident happened, but this officer was chastising this man, and you just have to watch the video. It'll literally make you mad. And the man has already filed a federal lawsuit now against the city and the police officer and everything. But like I say, there was no gun involved, but this guy was just out of control. I mean, this law enforcement officer was literally out of control.
It's sad.
But again, you have no recourse in Arkansas law to fight this. And it's like, why should you have to be arrested just for them to just drop the charges against you because they know that there was no reason for them to arrest you to begin with?
Yeah.
So,
and that's where it's like, okay, well, you don't want to assume worse motives. I mean, it could be that there's an officer that still doesn't know what the law is because the higher-ups have not told them. But then at some point, it's like, is this just harassment? And that's what gets frustrating. And this is why our politicians need to take action, and the governor needs to correctly define constitutional carry in what it is, because when there is a growing rift between law-abiding citizens and our law enforcement that we care about very much, and I'm talking about the Arkansas State Police and others, that's something that you don't want to let that just hang out there and simmer. You know, you don't want there to be a divide. These are people that are protecting and serving us, and you know, they're doing that because we as the people have decided to give them that power, and then we as the people have our representatives that change the laws accordingly, whether it's Act 746 or Act 486, and we expect them to, you know, enforce the ones on the books, even if they disagree with it, even if it changes a little bit of the culture. That's part of working for the government. The people get to make changes in their government.
Well, I've tried to make it clear to a lot of people, you know, the problems we've had after 746 was passed. We wouldn't be anywhere where we are today if it wasn't for people like us and our group and others who were basically pushing it and shoving it down their faces, because they would just basically ignore it.
Yes, they would.
So,
yeah.
On one hand, we're activists. We're trying to be activists in a good way. We're not trying to make it a free-for-all with firearms, but at the same time, the law is the law, and it has to be enforced on people, like the difference between concealed carry and open carry. I'm not a big open carry proponent per se, but at the same time, what does it take to stop the average person from seeing a gun and going, oh my God, he's got a gun? Mm-hmm. Well, the only way to do that is to get people used to seeing firearms on people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And open carry is one of the best ways to do that, because if it's covered up, well, nobody knows you got a gun. Now, you can argue what's the best way to carry, open carry, concealed carry. That's an individual decision.
Yeah.
But we have to get people used to seeing firearms and not jumping out of their skin just by the sight of one.
Yeah, and if we can't do that here in Arkansas, we really got problems. Let me. Have you been following this Pennsylvania arrest out of the Starbucks? Have you been following this at all, Felix?
Yes, I have a little bit, and that's one of the questions I brought up in the group. I said, now, here's the thing. We're always told if you carry into a business, and whether you're concealed carrying, open carrying, and the business decides that they don't like you with a gun in there, okay, they can ask you to leave. And then you really have no choice but to leave at that point, because then you're trespassing, okay? So a lot of guys want to puff their chest out. Well, it's my right to carry. Well, it's also a private business. If they decide they don't want that firearm in there, then that's up to them. However, we have to leave, otherwise it's trespassing.
Correct.
Now let's take this to what happened at the Starbucks. Here's these two black guys who were sitting in a Starbucks, and I've heard these black guys are actually realtors. They're not just bums, but I'm not 100% sure about that. They were waiting for a friend of theirs to show up.
Yeah, it does not look good.
To go to the bathroom.
Yeah, go ahead. It doesn't look good. I've seen the video. It is interesting, but I was kind of like you. I was like, well, why not just leave? I mean, if you're being asked to leave, why not leave?
Right. Well, the problem here is I don't know why they did. So this was a good case of these customers are being trespassed. So legally, now again, I'm not unsure about Pennsylvania law and Arkansas law, but once you're trespassed, you have to leave. So technically, the cops were doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. They came and arrested these guys because they were told to leave and they didn't leave. Okay, fair shot. Now, what would happen if one of us was going in a facility carrying a gun and we were asked to leave and we decided not to leave? Now, these people in Starbucks is being chastised very severely for asking these people to leave because they were black. And they weren't hurting anybody. Okay, let's turn that around. If you're somebody carrying a firearm and you're asked to leave with the same business, it doesn't have to be Starbucks. It can be any business.
Yeah.
Would the same business be chastised for asking somebody to leave?
No, not like this. They'd be celebrated. They'd be like, way to go, way to promote gun-free zones that to keep us safe. That's a really good contrast, actually. I hadn't thought about that, Felix. It's really good.
Yep, that's my point.
Yeah, and I would just say, a lot of gun owners would leave, and especially there's so many gun owners that respect that sign if they see it. They say, well, I'm not going to go in there. I mean, it technically is you're the gun owner or the private business owner can set their own firearm policy on their own property. Now, I know a lot of firearm owners that will not even go to the businesses because they don't want to give up their right to protect themselves there, and so they're just not going to spend their money there. But this is about freedom of choice here, and honestly, with the whole Starbucks thing, Felix, I mean, I've been in Starbucks, and they don't let you go to the bathroom, and they've got a sign up that I believe even says that, like paying, if you want to use the bathroom, you got to buy something. It's just their policy. And yet, now they're it is crazy. We really don't know what the consequences are going to be of having such a hypersensitive society at this point. And it is just fascinating watching this and ridiculous at the same time. Felix Normand from Patriots of X746, I appreciate it. I'm being waved on. I got to go. So
thank you.
All right.
See you later.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Folks, go to Facebook.com, search for Patriots of X746, and ask to become a member of this very, very giant and influential group here in Arkansas on the Second Amendment. Back in a moment. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas. Bob Maloney here from ASA News, The Parrot. Breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock. Over now to our new on-site reporter, Susan Shenanigans. Susan?
Thanks, Bob. The governor has just announced that a Blue Ribbon Task Force is to be formed.
Today, I'm asking your support for a Blue Ribbon Legislative Task Force to be created and directed to recommend further reform.
Now we go live to the chamber to listen in for more information on the task force.
I hereby call this session into order. First on the agenda for today is the formation of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Is there anyone who would like to give their thoughts on the task force?
Yes, as someone who's deeply conservative, why is the governor choosing the color blue for this task force? Sounds like he's really a Democrat loyalist. Why not a red ribbon to prove he's a true conservative?
Well, I represent Walmart, and we agree with the color of the task force ribbon. The color blue is best consistent with the Walmart brand.
I object to this choice. Blue is the wrong color ribbon for this task force.
Well, who are you?
I am Mr. P.C. Wrights, and I represent Target, and we want the ribbon to be red. not blue.
Hold it right there. This seems like a tough decision. Why not ask the governor to call a special session at a later date for an important decision as this?
I think this is something worth talking about. I motion that we decide the color of the ribbon today.
I second it. Fine. We can decide it now. Does anyone have any other suggestions for the color of the ribbon?
I think the color should be white.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. Definitely not white.
I agree with Mr. PC Wrights. Maybe we should choose green for the farmers.
You like the color green because you are a farmer. I think it should be purple, so we can display how Arkansas is an extremely moderate state.
Why are we even discussing this? Shouldn't we be talking about tax reform instead of wasting time with this?
Well, the people have spoken. They believe this is worth talking about, so we are deciding this now.
Excuse me, sir, but shouldn't the color of the ribbon be rainbow to include all types of people?
Please, silence your phones.
I just received a call from Walmart HQ, and they agree with, what was your name again? My name is Fabulous. They agree with Fabulous that the color should be rainbow.
Target concurs with the decision of it being rainbow-colored ribbon.
Is there a motion to make the ribbon rainbow-colored?
I motion to make the color rainbow.
I second the motion. The motion carries because I said so.
The committee will now vote and not be on record to keep the people in the dark. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you for listening to ASA News, The Parrot. Next up, there are reports of a gorilla on top of the Capitol Dome demanding massive sums of taxpayer cash. His name? Medicaid expansion.
PHP Parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us. Yeah, man, that is a very interesting story with the Starbucks situation because of the outrage here of saying that this happened. And you know now Starbucks is closing in like a week or so. They're going to close 8,000 stores for an entire afternoon so that they can give their employees sensitivity training. The manager that called the police on these two men has now been reassigned to another store. And, of course, the police department of Philadelphia says they did nothing wrong. And if you watch the video, they spoke with these men for like 10 minutes. We're trying to get them to leave because they were called to get them to leave because the policy is you got to buy something if you want to use the bathroom. Of course, they're just waiting they're just waiting for a meeting. And so, people are saying it's discrimination. I mean, I don't think it's discrimination. I know what I would have done. I mean, I seriously, I would have, if police officers were gathering around me saying that the store manager wants me to leave, I would have left. I would have said, oh, really? Okay, well, that's unfortunate. I disagree. I think it's ridiculous, but yeah, I would have left. That's what I would have done. I understand the CEO of Starbucks has met with these gentlemen, though, and apologized. But anyway, we just do not know what kind of consequences this is going to have on our society when people are so hypersensitive, they're so susceptible to boycotts. And I don't know. I just feel like common sense is just out the window right now. We'll be back.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk, 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Also, if we had done, put bad information out there, the media would be still harping on it.
Mm-hmm.
That memo issue has gone away. Then we're moving on to the next issue. Now, even our findings and recommendations that are coming out on the Russia investigation that the House Intel Committee just recently concluded, you haven't heard much about that either. And there was big furor over, they're shutting down the investigation too soon, and how can we do this? Well, you haven't heard much about that either. So you'll, in the next, week or so, that's all been submitted to the intelligence community for declassification.
Okay.
It'll come out, be made public, and there will be a minority view addendum, but they'll all come out as a single document, the findings, recommendations, and then the minority view, and see for yourself. Make the assessment on your own. I'm not going to try and bias you or anything like that. And then we'll talk again when you've had a chance to review all that.
Okay.
And I would encourage you to do it. It'll be out there online in public space, and you'll be able to pull it and look at it. And you will be absolutely amazed when you read it.
Okay, I'm now intrigued. I can't wait. That's sounds awesome. Because I just feel like, I just know the media is what they're doing is they're certainly putting out something that I don't believe is factual when it comes to this whole Russia investigation and everything else. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. Congressman Rick Crawford, Can we talk about the tariff situation that's kind of been going on with China? And there's probably some Arkansas farmers out there listening, and they probably kind of want to know what your thoughts are on that.
I hope there are a lot of farmers listening right now, because I don't know that look, there's a whole lot of farmers that have my cell phone number, and when there's problems and they want to call, they got an issue, they call me, and I make myself available to my constituents, and I want them to know this, that this goes back to the look past the personality and the rhetoric and focus in on the numbers. The numbers are on our side. Now, I will say this, in the rhetoric that ensued immediately after the announcement of the tariffs, the Chinese are announcing they're going to retaliate X, Y, and Z and all this other kind of stuff. And you look at what's happening with the soybean market. So the soybean market reacts and starts to go down. I can't prove this, but common sense dictates, and based on the past behavior of China, you can probably assume that they shorted soybeans before they started the economic saber rattling.
Okay.
So they shorted the soybean market. That's number one. Run the price down through this process, and when it finds the bottom, then they buy up in cash. So good deal for China. Okay, so we again, this really kind of underlies the whole point of what Trump is making, is that they manipulate, they don't play by the rules, they utilize their status as a developing economy as they're recognized by the WTO, which absolutely is completely unfounded. They are not a developing economy. They are a very developed and aggressively growing economy, and in fact a belligerent actor in the economy.
Yeah.
And so they shouldn't have that kind of status. But when they get that status, they get to play by a different set of rules. And so that's one thing to consider. It's been going on for 20-plus years. So all these things have to happen to get right. But in the short term, is this going to affect Arkansas farmers? It might to some degree, but by the time we get to harvest, you look at what's going on right now. Chinese have a huge demand for soybeans and corn. They've got to buy it somewhere. Argentina is having a crop failure for all intent and purpose, major drought. They can't rely on Argentina to fill the orders and to meet their demand. So the soybeans are going to come from somewhere else. So in a manner of speaking, these commodities like soybeans and corn, to a large degree, are what you might call fungible, in that in the marketplace, they're going to move around. They're going to go where they need to go. So we might not necessarily have to directly sell our soybeans to China with a 25% tariff tacked on it. That's not even going to happen. But if it did, we could just transship through Argentina and other countries just like they've been doing with steel. So, the point I'm trying to make is our soybeans are going to find their way into the marketplace to fill the demand in the marketplace. And this is a short-term blip whereby the Chinese are doing everything they can to their own gain to take effect or take advantage of a market, a short-term market advantage, if you will, that they created.
Yeah.
So none of the fundamentals have changed. They have to consume our soybeans.
Yeah.
They just don't have the resources themselves. They've got one.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks, welcome to the program. It is hour number 2, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Building a Liberty Machine here, 870-275-9799. Broadcasting the most popular spot, I guess, is facebook.com/Conduit News. But also over at conduitnews.com and our YouTube page. Give us a like or a subscribe, I guess, over at the YouTube page, Conduit News, for our smaller videos and little short clips, things like that. Okay, so let's start with what happened yesterday in the public corruption trial of John Woods. Now, what we learned is essentially that, and this is what's absolutely amazing. If you, there was a organization called AmeriCorps John Woods wanted to give a bunch of money to, and $400,000 grant, and he successfully did. He gave $400,000 to this group called AmeriCorps. The problem is it wasn't incorporated yet. Didn't get incorporated until after they got the grant approved, and it didn't have a nonprofit status. And so we learned yesterday that they used the 501c3 status of another group, Decision Point. And that's where Rusty Cranford comes in. And Decision Point is, of course, their parent company, rather, they're a child company, if you will, of Preferred Family Healthcare out of Missouri, which is where Rusty Cranford is being charged and will go to trial for, well, of course, Rusty Cranford tried to have a guy murdered. So, according to the news reports, things like that. So, I mean, what we got yesterday was essentially Mike Norton, okay? Mike Norton used to be the director of one of the economic development districts. Of course, the economic development districts are what were used to launder the money, to wash it. It goes from Little Rock to these economic development districts, and then the legislators unofficially, but it is official for all intents and purposes, steer the money where they want it to go. Now, specifically, Mike Norton was a member of the director of the Northwest Arkansas Economic Development District. And that is the time period from 2012 to 2014. That's when everything started happening with the general improvement funds and the laundering of the money and the kickbacks. Now, you've heard a lot about Ecclesia. You've heard a lot about what happened with Randall Shelton and Orrin Paris and Ecclesia College and the land deal. But see, John Woods is involved in another deal. So separate from that, and this is why Randall Shelton and Orrin Paris wanted to get a separate trial, because John Woods is being charged in these other incidents too, and they didn't get a separate trial. And again, it has to do with a $400,000 grant between Woods and State Representative Mike and Neal. And they gave it, again, to a company called AmeriWorks. Of course, we know that Mike and Neal pled guilty. Grant records show Woods directed $275,000 to this company, AmeriWorks. Who was the incorporator of AmeriWorks? Russell Rusty Cranford. You know, the guy that had to, tried to get somebody contract a guy to kill the competing witness up in New Jersey. You can't make this stuff up. So, again, his trial is June 11th up in Springfield. So, AmeriWorks accepted the grant on September 26th, according to Doug Thompson reporting this in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. They incorporated, though, on September 27th, and then they deposited the $400,000 check on September 30th. Now, when Rusty Cranford was interviewed by federal investigators, it is said that when that happened, they decided to give the $400,000 check back to the Northwest Arkansas Planning and Development District. And I think at that point, when that happened, John Woods and Mike O'Neill, or John Woods, didn't they try to give some of that money? They're like, oh, well, it got returned. Well, let's try to give some more to Ecclesia then. I mean, that's called a double down right there. Doug Thompson writes, AmeriWorks had no business address of its own and was having its grant correspondence sent to offices of Decision Point. Again, that's the connection to Preferred Family Health Care. Very strange, right? That they were playing so fast. They were playing so fast and so loose that they were able to secure this grant when they didn't even have nonprofit status, and they used the nonprofit status of somebody else. Now that is nuts. But let's go to the broader article. Go to this one, because this is the full article by Doug Thompson. Tax status trickery eased grants path. Joe, do you see this one? Tax status trickery eased grants path. Ex-officials testify. Witnesses in kickback trial say funds dispersal controlled by lawmakers. So, is that the one that you're on? What does the top say? Yeah, this is the same one. Yeah, so basically, the article that I was just reading from was just a smaller article that was posted yesterday. This is the full report by Doug Thompson. Tax status trickery. This is so this is exposing what John Woods was doing here. But specifically, they give a little bit more detail, again, about Mike Norton, who's from Harrison, and how he was the witness. He was the government's witness yesterday, and he was testifying. Get this, and this is fantastic. He basically testified, we were just laundering the money, and the legislators basically get to the legislators just decide and pick and choose where they want the project to go. Let me see here. 3 co-conspirators. The development district administered the grants, which have since been ruled unconstitutional. Mike Norton, State Senator Bart Hester of Cave Springs, and Mayor Tim McKinney of Berryville, who is a member of the Development District's board, all testified on Tuesday that board approval was a fiction. Now, I want you to understand how amazing that is. That's a big statement. They all testified that board approval was a fiction. That's pretty big. Because it's confirming everything that we know. I mean, it's confirming. That's not even a big deal, honestly. If I'm honest, because the Supreme Court already has said that that's what this is. That you guys are just a rubber stamp, just kind of like the Arkansas Legislative Council tends to be. So Senator Bart Hester testified. That's interesting. That he reports more on that later in the article. I got a bunch of texts yesterday, by the way, about, well, I don't have it confirmed, but there was I'll just say that somebody was like, somebody said, I think I just saw blank having lunch with blank. That's what I was told yesterday. I'm not going to mention their names because I don't know for sure. But it's interesting. Very interesting. McKinney, let's talk about McKinney, the mayor of Berryville. He testified that quarterly board meetings rarely lasted more than an hour and included other business besides awarding grants, and that members received little information on the grants they were approving other than the name of the recipients, the amounts awarded, and the lawmakers supporting each proposal. And grants supported by lawmakers were awarded, McKinney said. Grants without lawmaker support were not awarded. Wow. This is great that it's all coming out. Let the record show what this fund really was. It's just a slush fund. That's all it is. Okay, so then this gets into the AmeriWorks stuff that we just covered. So Norton confirmed on the stand Monday that he resigned on September 27th at the request of the district's board because of the state's finances. Apparently, some of their money had been used to meet payroll. That didn't set too well with the board. And Doug Thompson writes here that Norton did not know of any kickback plan, according to his testimony. And we got a rundown of what we heard. Okay, so it talks about Bart Hester here. So Senator Bart Hester, Doug Thompson writes, was one of the lawmakers who used development districts as a holding entity to keep grant money to be used gradually throughout the 2-year budget cycle as local needs arose, he testified. Woods was more prone to award, so John Woods was more prone to award his money quickly. You got to get that kickback. Then approach other lawmakers who still had funds available later as needs arose, Hester testified. So Hester here, and he said he did this, that he sent the money, in a previous article, we've known this, that Hester sent some of his money to Ecclesia College. And here's the thing. It was the thing to do. This is what people were doing, and he went on to testify, quote, buildings were not finished and dorms were in disrepair. There were roofs that needed replacing. The government has 22 witnesses anyway. So that's what Bart Hester had to say, that is why he decided to give his share of his general improvement monies, or a lot of it, to John Woods and Ecclesia. There are more witnesses coming, folks. We're going to wait and see what else happens in this trial. I think it's good that the truth is getting out there about what a lot of people in Little Rock have known for a very, very, very long time, been waiting for this trial for a very long time. It's, I guess, just the the fallibility of man on display here, and we've got to stop this public corruption in Arkansas. We got to stand up and stop it. We're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Back in a moment. Who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The Zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the Zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages, because right now my feelings are so hurt, and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny, so you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Okay, fine, whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP Parody.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, so the Newton County Hog Farm, C&H Hog Farm, they're going to be applying for a different permit in hopes of gaining a 5-year operating license from the state. What has happened to the hog farmers here at Newton County in the C&H Hog Farm is really an example of how the government can just completely ruin hardworking people with ambitions' lives. C&H Hog Farm has essentially been targeted, and we've exposed this on the program, by radical environmental wackos that are tied to George Soros' Sierra Club. And we've exposed that. And it's a shame that the pressure that is mounted, what they do is you have the George Soros' Sierra Club, and they come here with their disciples, and then they set up Arkansas-sounding names of coalitions and associations and things like that. But in reality, these people just don't want people to be able to farm and take, basically, subdue the earth. They don't think it should happen. And so the shame is that the Department of, the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality here, in my opinion, from what I can see, because I've looked at all the documents, we've gone over the documents, and there are a plethora of them. There's a plethora of news on C&H Hog Farms and the letters to the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality from these Arkansas-sounding associations and groups. The letters they try to go over the head to the EPA, and they're trying to get all these sanctions and things like that. And so you have a C&H Hog Farms that has a license to operate, and they do everything they can to reapply, and they dot all of their I's and cross all their T's, and then they're told they're not going to get the license. And it's just been, year after year after year, and this huge struggle for this family and huge struggle for these business owners that are trying to feed the country at C&H Hog Farms, and they've dotted all their I's. They don't have any leakage that's leaking into the river. They have had the tests, but the tests weren't good enough. The tests come back, and it doesn't matter that there was no contamination, that there was no seepage. Again, I'll say this again. What has happened to C&H Hog Farm out of Newton County is an example how the government can ruin someone's life who just wants to create something and has ambition in life. That is what the government does. It sucks your ambition from you because is what it can do, rather. And I just want to say, the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, I don't know what you were thinking on this. I don't know what the Hutchinson administration that governs the Department of Environmental Quality is thinking on this. Only thing I can think of is we have some far liberal groups that have a lot more reach into this state than we thought. But the good news is, let's hope that something can happen for these folks, and let's hope that it actually works out. C&H Hog Farms has submitted application documents for a different type of operating permit 3 months after another application was turned down. If all of the documents are submitted and the application is approved by the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, C&H Hog Farms would be able to continue operating under a 5-year permit. The farm that houses 6,503 hogs is still operating under its expired permit while the owners appeal the department's denial of their application. It was unclear Tuesday whether the hog farm has submitted its entire application, blah, 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 blah. Trying to put this family out of business. Not to mention, what's the mascot of the University of Arkansas? All right, the Razorbacks, yeah. Does anyone see how weird that is? It's like, well, we're we'll let a pig be our mascot, but we're not actually going to farm them. I mean, that would be crazy. I mean, we'll barbecue them at a tailgate, but we're not going to actually use the land to raise hogs. What's the nickname for the Razorback? The Hogs? Yeah, that's weird. That's weird. I wonder what is going on here, folks. What is going on? This C&H hog farm thing, I mean, it's again, it's just an example of how government can ruin people's lives. And the problem, I guess when I say that, you need to know the history here. These people were in almost constant communication with the government. They were asking them, hey, what do we need to do to move forward? The government said, well, you need to do this, you need to do that, and you need to do this. And there's probably a lot more than that. And they did it. And then the government came back later and said, no, just kidding. In reality, you don't even need that type of license. You need this type of license. Or in reality, no, you didn't meet our criteria. Well, we did everything you told us that we needed to do. You ever, I bet all of us out there have encountered some government official at some point that told you inaccurate information. And it really just goes to show that these bureaucracies, while they are created with laws, so you have a law that's passed that starts the initial bureaucracy, whatever the bureaucracy is or the department is. But from that point, the enforcement of the rules that the bureaucracy is there to set up or whatever can be very subjective. Yeah, I mean, it can be for how it can be anything from how the lines are run at the DMV. And who's going to decide who really gets to go first? Take a number. Or it can be, well, how we enforce the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality's hog farm permitting process. And we decided it was one way this year, and then next year we decided it's another way, and the people suffer. The people suffer. I am one of these crazy people, though. I think that all, especially federal bureaucracies, I won't go so far as to say state bureaucracies, but I think state bureaucracies are, I think their rules are unconstitutional. I think when a bureaucracy, I think bureaucracies that have the power to create rules that the citizens of this country have to follow, and if you don't follow them, you owe a fine or you go to jail. That's the exact same thing that happens when Congress passes a law that you don't follow. Well, see, I believe in something called Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution, which says all legislative powers are herein granted. All is a pretty all-encompassing word. All legislative powers, which means that the legislature, and there's Supreme Court precedent for this a long time ago, cannot create another legislator that is not answerable to the vote of the people. Right? All legislative powers herein granted. And that's what these bureaucracies are. They're unconstitutional because they can just create a rule out of nowhere and you've got to follow it. And they'll say, well, the legislature, you know, It's like, well, that's they always say that, but it's just a rubber stamp. You submit it to the Federal Registry, it becomes basically a rule, but it's a law. They're the same thing because if you don't follow a law, go to jail, pay a fine. Don't follow a rule, go to jail, pay a fine. You can't have bureaucracies be lawmakers.
4 billion population and an increased livestock sector placing more demand on their need for corn and soybeans. So, you know, this I hope farmers will, and I know they do. And the reason I know that they recognize this because they haven't been getting any calls.
Okay, so they understand, and
they absolutely farmers are smart.
Yes, they are. And, hey, do you think people are kind of excited though? I mean that the Trump administration. I mean, I know economic saber rattling. I like that term, by the way. But that there's somebody trying to be proactive to stop China from manipulating the way they are doing things. That this is kind of a necessary. This is a necessary action that the president's taking.
Oh, we're all engaged in that. In fact, the president, he's got a new economic advisor in Larry Kudlow, his trade representative, Lighthizer. Everybody that's involved in trade and in this global economic cadre that he has, they're all involved in that, trying to hold their feet to the fire and recognize that China has got to be held to account if they're going to be continue to be considered a developing economy. Then it's going to put everybody else at a disadvantage. The good news is countries like in the European Union, Great Britain, Japan, Korea, others in the Pacific Rim, Australia, New Zealand, they all understand that the Chinese have been manipulating, continue to manipulate. They float their currency, they cheat, and take advantage of people. They all recognize this. So we have a huge coalition, economic coalition, that will address this, I think, aggressively to prevent China from continuing to cheat the way they do.
And then I saw where, after the tariff thing came out, then I guess, was it on Tuesday, I think you heard that, China then lowered their tariff on foreign car imports, which is going to help companies like Ford. I thought that was interesting. It's almost like there was some sort of, give and take there.
Well, there absolutely is, because they know that they can only, carry out this bluff for so long. The truth of the matter is, we've been on the bad end of the stick for quite some time, and so credit where credit's due. That this is a president that's recognized that and is trying to take action, and we might have to grit our teeth, in the very short term, but we're in a much better position now, and you can see the evidence of that because they're already coming back to the table and saying, well, okay, let's do this. We'll take this tariff down. We'll do this and we'll do that. And they know that they're going to have to play ball to some degree. And, look, Xi Jinping is for China and Trump is for the United States. And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yes.
But all of us have to be in this. And what I don't like seeing is when you get these guys, particularly if this takes place over in the Senate, and they start, getting...
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Speaking of the daily dose of truth, folks, welcome back to the program, and welcome Republican gubernatorial candidate Jan Morgan's on the line. Jan, thanks for coming on.
Oh, good morning, Paul Harrell. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. Hey, so listen, I covered this a little bit yesterday, and I've listened to many of your stump speeches, and I have never heard you tell a lie. But there's some, and specifically Senator Jason Rapert on Facebook, he was saying that you critiquing what's going on here in the state, that you're telling lies. Address that if you don't mind.
Exactly. That is a typical strategy of the left, and why am I not surprised that the counterfeit Republicans in this party are using the campaign strategies of the left? I'm not surprised at all. When you can't rebut what your opponent is saying, then you go after your opponent with personal attacks. See, rather than just talk about what am I lying about, they just want to call me names. That says more about them than it does me. Look, in fact, Paul, on the campaign trail, it wasn't only Jason Rapert and Jamie Barker and all the rest of the people who are water boys for Asa Hutchinson who've made that response. But I was speaking to Pulaski County Republican women just last week. Have you heard about what happened there?
I heard, a little bird told me that there was some people maybe kind of heckling, or one person heckling.
Not just one. No, not some people. In fact, by and large, the group was wonderful to me. The group was fine. But what happened was the leader, the president of the Pulaski County Republican Women, started yelling at me in the middle of my speech. She interrupted my speech to start yelling at me that I was not being honest. I was lying. I can't even remember exactly. She started yelling, which I thought was, it was unbelievable. I've never seen anyone completely lose control of themselves the way she did. But I stopped my speech and I looked at her and I said, "Excuse me?" And then she was beside herself. the reason she was beside herself, Paul, is because she's very openly an ASA supporter, which is fine. I don't have any problem with that. We all have our people that we support and racist. But as the president of a Republican committee, it is against Republican rules ever to show bias in a primary. That is a written policy of the Republican Party. And she was an open violation. I excused and overlooked it the first time. She accused me of being a liar, and I looked at her and I said, okay, excuse me. I'll be glad to answer your question when I finish my speech, but let me just assure you and everyone in this room that for 27 years of my life, I was an award-winning television investigative journalist. A journalist's credibility relies on truth and putting factual information out there. So I said I can gladly, and we'll be glad to supply anyone and everyone in this room with validation, documentation, written, that the information I'm putting out there for you is fact-based. I can't, I can be accountable for everything that's coming out of my mouth. Mm-hmm. So shut her down for a minute. I continue my speech. And the reason she yelled at me again is because as I spoke, she saw more and more people who had been misled by counterfeit Republicans, including our current governor, Asa Hutchinson, with carefully crafted language. As she saw me transforming those people from Asa supporters to Jan supporters, it upset her so terribly. She yelled at me again and interrupted me once again. At the second interruption, I stopped, I looked at her, and I said, okay, here we go. First of all, you are not allowed, as the president of a committee, to be openly biased against an opponent, or against any opponent, any Republicans in a primary. You are in violation by your actions of Republican Party rules. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to call for your resignation, although I should, because I understand this is a very passionate time. I'm glad you're excited and passionate about your candidate. But I'm going to ask you, once again, do not interrupt me. Let me finish my speech. And at that point, the other women, including the other women who were office holders in the Republican Party in that county, looked at her and agreed with me and said verbally, out loud, that's right, she is right. Ms. Morgan is right. You can't do that. You shouldn't do that.
Good.
Paul, yes, they stood up for me. So I finished my speech, and then, of course, she jumped up and said, oh, and now we're going to have Missy Urban on. She's going to speak for the governor. And I just said, I want it duly noted that last month when the governor had his time here, no one from my campaign was asked and invited to come here to rebut anything the governor said. So once again, here is another situation where there's been open bias against the candidate or candidates. So, they're getting desperate. The other side is getting desperate, and all they can do is call me names instead of coming back and actually showing and saying anything. I said, show me one thing I've said that's not true. When I put information out there, it's fact-based.
It is, and it's powerful stuff. I think people are. It's maybe a combination of two things. One, the facts of the spending record, the advocated tax increases by ASA, and then the past tax increases, the tire tax and things like that, digital downloads. I think that's people don't want to hear that because, and here's the second reason. And this is, again, a leftist tactic. You mentioned that it's a leftist tactic to when you don't have anything else, you just start to call people names. Well, personal attacks. I think that we have a little bit of a leftist cult of personality problem where instead of looking at the policies that somebody's advocating or what they've done, they maybe just really like Asa, and they think, and they've always been told he's a nice guy, and they don't want to admit that he may be a nice guy, but that he's actually for bigger and ever expanding government.
True, and also there are so many Republicans that have not been paying attention to what's truly happening in our government, and when you start telling them the truth, it is shocking to them. They cannot handle it, and steadily. Here's a great concern I have, Paul. I know without a doubt that it is the leadership of the Republican Party's determined effort to just grow across the board in all elected positions across the state, transforming Democrats into Republicans without really caring if they truly embrace the Republican Party platform. I'm not saying that because I think that. I'm saying because I actually heard it at a committee meeting spoken by Sarah Jo Reynolds when she stood up before the committee, and she said, we want you to tell Democrats who are running for office, any office, that if they don't change over and run as Republicans, we are going to put candidates and races against them. And Paul, it's very dangerous. And I did get up and speak on that. Back this was long before I was even running for office. I did get up and counter that when I spoke to that group. I said, that is a very dangerous path to take. I don't want people to just transform to Republican Party because if they don't, because of threats, they're not going to be able to win. I want them to transform to the Republican Party because they truly embrace and believe in the Republican Party platform. And I'm telling you that the problems we're having right now with counterfeit Republicans is because we have been pushing Democrats to switch over just so they can get elected. And it's wrong, and it's going to hurt us. It's going to destroy this party in the long run. And Asa Hutchinson's leadership as a progressive, establishment progressive, doing things like Democrats do, like raising taxes, growing government, increasing spending, doing nothing about corruption. In fact, sitting on his hands when Republican legislators tried to pass legislation that would help stop corruption by putting more transparency in government and showing connections, financial connections between legislators and lobbyists. Those kinds of things are going to destroy our party. We cannot do 4 more years of that. And if we do, the Democrats will take over state government once again because we will have proven that leadership and that having Republicans in control is no different than having Democrats in control, that we're still going to have the same old from career politicians. It will destroy this party, and it will be devastating for the citizens of Arkansas.
We're talking with Republican gubernatorial candidate Jan Morgan. She's on the line with us this morning. Jan, back in 2006, Asa Hutchinson was running for governor. He ran unsuccessfully, and but he said that he wanted to eliminate the grocery tax altogether. Wanted to eliminate it, and of course, Governor Beebe, when he won, got in office, he shrunk the grocery tax down to a minuscule amount. It's supposed to go down even further next year. And now the Tax Reform and Relief Task Force, they have a list of exemptions that they're thinking about ending, and one of those would be the grocery tax exemption. What are your thoughts on that list, and what are your thoughts on the grocery tax?
My thoughts on the list are this is just the latest disaster for the Republican Party. Paul, you're right. ACE's Tax Reform Commission is supposed to be, and they're misleading people by saying we're going to reform the current tax code. That's what they're supposed to be doing, but they're not really looking at ways to reform the current tax code in a way that's beneficial to the people. They're looking at ways to reform the tax code in a way that is beneficial to the state. And their commission is looking at raising taxes on groceries and prescriptions, as well as a slew of other areas, because they're wanting to repeal current tax exemptions. Well, when you repeal exemptions that are currently benefiting the people, that means people are going to start paying taxes on those things that they didn't have to pay taxes on in the past. How is that beneficial for the people of Arkansas? Republican leadership is supposed to be about limited government, lowering taxes, and instead, look what we're doing. As governor of this state, I would have charged that commission with finding ways to cut taxes, to lighten the tax burden off the people of this state. We are currently the most poor, among the most poor by income in America, and yet we are also among the most heavily taxed. And if the Republican Party and this tax commission does not do something to significantly lighten the tax burden off the people, once again, it's going to be devastating not only for this party, but for Arkansans. As the governor right now, should have stepped up to the plate and said, excuse me, but we don't want to look at exemptions, certainly not on products like groceries and prescriptions and used cars at $4,000 and under. Who buys cars like that? People like me, people like citizens who are trying to cut corners and save money, and now we're going to have to pay a tax on that. You know, give me an idea what the additional what a tax is going to be like on a $4,000 car. Mm-hmm. That kind of figure is going to break the back of people who are counting pennies. Yeah. And yes, there are hundreds of thousands of people in this state who are in that boat. We are counting pennies because of the excessive tax burden. Paul, you know, the saddest thing I've seen on the campaign trail, and it breaks my heart, because in my view, Excessive taxation is not just a fiscal issue, it is a moral issue. But the saddest thing is people are on their last leg as far as trusting government. They've lost all trust and all faith in people running for political office. And those few who are stayed on and are trying to hang in the fight are on their last hope. They're looking at me and looking me in the eye with a desperate look of, are you going to be different? Are you really going to be different? I mean, because every time we keep electing politicians who promise one thing, and then once they get into office, they deliver something else, and it's never in the interest of the people. And people are, if they walk away, Paul, if they give up, we lose. And what will happen to this state, once again, will be extremely difficult to ever turn around. Right now, so many people are paying attention and engaged in their state government, and I'm so excited that so many are in the fight, and they're giving everything they can to get me elected because they know I'm the real deal.
Yeah.
And anything and everything I do, and I can assure you, number one, we're going to cap spending, because government spending requires more taxes to feed the beast. We will cap spending, and then we will immediately get in there and start looking for ways to cut taxes, to lighten the tax burden off the backs of the people, off the backs of the businesses, and bring real tax reform to this state.
Yeah, I love all that. I think that sounds great. I'm worried in terms of this the task force and the list of exemptions. You know, I worry that they when it's all said and done, because they're going to say, well, we'll eliminate exemptions, which is a tax increase, but we'll cut taxes over here, so it'll be a net wash. But I'm worried that the government ends up getting more money. But here's a question for you: how does you or Asa, whichever one wins, facing that Democrat, in November and having a debate with that Democrat, assuming that I'm assuming that we'll actually have a debate because right now, of course, Asa won't debate you.
No, he won't debate me, but he'll debate the Democrat.
But isn't it going to be you can just see the Democrat attacks are going to be on this grocery tax issue. The Democrats are going to say, you're proposing to raise a grocery tax.
It's not going to just be on that issue. It's going to be on all of the tax increases that have happened under the Hutchinson administration with Republicans in control. And if I were a Democrat, I would just pound him with that. And he cannot defend it. What is he going to say on the debate stage about why he did that? Well, because we have to take Obamacare is devastating the state. Medicaid expansion, well, why did Medicaid expansion happen? Asa, that's what I would say if I was a Democrat. You see, he cannot defend what Republicans have done on the debate stage against the Democrat, but I can, Paul. You know what I would say? I would look at Jared Henderson and I would say, let me tell you something. The Republican Party, the establishment end of this party, just like the establishment end of the Democrat Party, has betrayed the people. I don't represent the establishment end. The establishment end was part of the problem. I'm bringing to the stage part of the solution. I represent the conservative base of the Republican Party, and I am telling you, I'm not here to defend his record. I'm here because of his record, and we are going to be truly representing the Republican Party platform of limited government, limited taxes, and we are truly going to bring reform and tax relief to this state. So I don't have to stand up there and defend this egregious record.
That's right.
So I can take on the Democrat. We will easily defeat the Democrats in the general elections, hands down. In fact, I know Democrats in this state who are going to vote for me because they understand and they see the light that they cannot continue. This state cannot continue under this current tax burden.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to being on the stage with Jared Henderson, the Democrat, and debating him and showing the people that truly living and working in Arkansas is going to be better with conservative leadership at the helm. And I am believing that there are enough good Republicans in our House and Senate who agree with me, who've been voting the wrong way, Paul, on ASA's progressive agenda simply because of his arm twisting and his threatening to put opponents against them in their primaries if they didn't go with his agenda. I believe that when we free these Republican legislators up to do the right thing by the people, that a majority of them will do so. And I'm looking forward to being the leader of the Republican Party and helping restore the power back to the people of the state.
Let me ask you this. I know you go all across the state and you're speaking constantly.
I've been everywhere. I've been everywhere.
Yeah, so how you holding up? How you holding up with that kind of schedule?
It's exhausting, Paul, but I tell you what, the only thing that keeps me going, because people ask, we're pulling 19-hour days, 3, 4, 5 events a day. Yesterday I did 5 events, counted 5.
Wow.
And every event, a different speech delivered because it was a different group of people concerned about different issues. But here's what keeps me going, and here's what is the wind, truly the wind beneath my wings. It is the grassroots effort and how people, regular folks, are out there spending their personal money to put up billboards, creating their own signs, because they're truly fighting. I mean, they are trying so hard to win this race for the people, because it's truly the people's race to lose, not mine. This is not about Jan and Asa. It's about the people versus big government. That's really what it's about. And their engagement and their fight and their determination, it fuels my fire. It really does, and it keeps me going. And just when I start thinking I can't do another event in one day, I run into a person that looks me in the eye with that desperation look of, please help us.
Yeah, that's great.
And it keeps me going. Yes, sir.
Well, Jan Morgan, I appreciate you throwing your hat in the ring and doing all this, because it is a sacrifice, and I appreciate you, answering the call. When people wanted you to run, you stepped up, and we're going to continue to cover this election, and best of luck to you, Jan Morgan, and be safe.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and thank you.
All righty. Jan Morgan, everybody, Republican gubernatorial candidate, forcing Asa Hutchinson every single day to take another, another position that's to the right of what he actually believes. I mean, it happens almost by the day now. Has anybody noticed? We're going to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. I'm Paul Harrell, back in just a moment.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
This is State Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment. The Declaration of Independence states, to secure these rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. In other words, people are responsible for the character of their Congress. If that body be ignorant, reckless, or corrupt, it's because the people tolerate ignorance, recklessness, and corruption. If it be intelligent, brave, and pure, it's because the people demand these high qualities. If the next centennial does not find us a great nation, it will be because those who represent the enterprise and culture and morality of the nation do not abide in controlling the political forces. James Garfield. This is Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Thank you. Got to get that microphone back on. 870-275-9799. Wow. Man, let me tell you something. Jan Morgan is, I mean, do you understand? When you listen to Jan Morgan, she was just on the program if you're just joining us. Do you understand why Asa won't debate her? Does it make sense to you why? And there's only one reason. There's only one reason. Because he's scared of what you would think. He's scared. He's afraid that he would lose the debate. Do you understand now why Asa has used his office, and according to, one report, well, several reports, from the billboard owner, calling personally business owners trying to say, why are you putting that Jan Morgan billboard up, things like that. Do you understand why he's scared of her message getting out? Because she knows how to articulate it and believes in it. And I've always said, in conservatism, our argument wins. You just have to actually believe it and know how to articulate it properly, and we win. I've always said that. Do you understand why he's used his office to try to stop her from speaking at Republican committees and to get her uninvited? Do you understand why he's trying to do that? Speaking of leftist tactics of personal attacks and, believing not in the policy but in the personality, I mean, what about trying to silence speech? Isn't that a leftist tactic? Isn't that what we see all across the country right now? That if you are speaking and you're speaking facts and truth and it's things that the left don't want to hear, like the left doesn't want to hear, let's say, for example, that gender is a biological fact, that you are biologically male or biologically female, and those are the facts, and what do? They can't handle it. They snowflake out, and they try to silence you, or they riot, or they do something to exert force or power over you so that your message doesn't get out. Isn't that exactly what the Asa Hutchinson administration, the campaign, is trying to do right now? And I used administration intentionally, or even folks at the RPA. You don't think they know that if Asa were to lose on May 22nd, you've got a lot of people that are not going to have a job when it's all said and done? Yeah, people are circling the wagons, not just for Asa's benefit. There's a lot of self-interest here that just is natural and would need to be considered as well. But look at the leftist tactics. Look at the people saying names like liar. Look at them saying, how dare you say this about Asa? He's been a Republican for 30 years. Well, that's cult of personality. That's like Barack Obama stuff, in terms of, well, Barack Obama will just because he's Obama and he's awesome. Never mind the policies and the disastrous effects they have, and silencing speech, attempting to silence speech, and we now know. I mean, just listen to the interview. This is why he doesn't want to debate. This is why he tries to limit speech. Folks, that's all the time we have for today. Check us out at conduitnews.com. And go subscribe over to our YouTube channel, Conduit News, to get the smaller, shorter clips. Arkansas, be safe.
The news and talk of Northeast